What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. Today is going to be a little interesting. We have another Q&A. I was intending to get Lee Camp here, and Lee Camp actually just had a child, so it's going to be a little bit before we can get him on the podcast. And what we decided to do today is what we do every now and then when a guest cancels, and that is little Q&A. Gordo and I will talk, but today we got something really special for you. If you've seen the film Wake in the Darkness, the Aubrey Marcus film where he goes into darkness, there's a hand-drawn animator that I worked with in that film. His name's Curry Hobo, and he's going to be here today scribbling in the sidelines to basically create a visual field for you to listen to, so you're not just constantly staring at our faces. With that being said, can't wait to get to it on the Ben Stewart Podcast. All right. We are here, and can't really see me that well, but I'm in there.
You're corrected now.
All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, super excited for today. There's a few things I want to touch on. But first, before I hop into some of the topics, I just wanted to say like I said, Curry Hobo is going to be illustrating here for us. But we're not going to be able to see his face because he's got this hideous scar all over his face. I'm just kidding. He's a great looking guy, but it's going to screw with the cameras if we get back and forth between his shared screen and not. So this is how we're going to do it. And to get us started, the first thing that I wanted to mention, other than yo, what's up, Gordo? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm multitasking here with the tech stuff, making sure we're good to go. But the world is crazy as ever, per usual. So we are, there's plenty of content we can touch on.
You can just say it. We're screwed.
No, man, I'm the eternal optimist. But no,
I saw that brings something to mind. Did you do a podcast on somebody else's podcast, or is that the most optimistic conspiracy theorist, I think it was?
I don't know. Maybe I did the balancing act, like I think a month or so ago, with Garnett, one of our big followers, and we had some fun. It was a lot about UAPs and off-worldy type stuff, but I think I came out pretty optimistic.
Awesome. Well, I mean, when I saw it, it said the most optimistic conspiracy theorist. So that must be the title he gave it.
Maybe.
Cool, man. Glad you did that. I know Garnett, we're still trying to get our own podcast lined up. With that being said, was it Monday or Tuesday? It was one of those 2 days we launched and the music played the band. It's this mini doc that Gordo even did some of the B-roll for. It was this interview that I got of Charles Eisenstein early morning. The shot was super overexposed, and the content was so incredible that I wanted to at least cover it and add some beauty to it, so we're not just seeing this highly overexposed shot the entire time. And it turned out to be something that Charles himself really liked. So we decided not to just have it behind the paywall of Ben Joseph Stewart and to actually go with the gift model. And we went with the gift model, and it's doing really well. It's got some good views. It's got some great comments, and there have been a lot of people who have just donated. But the idea of the gift model is, if you make a piece of art as gift, like it's there for anybody, it wants to get out to as many people as possible without there being some kind of enforced or imposed scarcity around it when it could easily be shared. We went that model, and it really turns out a lot of people will give a lot more than they would if you just charge $10, $20. And so that's pretty incredible, but it's a beautiful piece. Charles's words are very touching. And so you're definitely going to want to check it out. It's on the YouTube page here. It's called And the Music Played the Band. And how's it doing? I think it's up around 20,000 views right now. It was just a couple days ago that it got put up there.
Yeah, so, people are really resonating with it. A lot of the comments, a lot of really good feedback. And essentially it's, I was tweaking the size there, but a lot of people, just really, I think right now what's really helpful too is just anything that's giving optimism, but not like some sort of naive optimism. That's just very just, I'm not, try and act like that you're not aware of obviously all the the craziness in the world, but talking about what's happening, but doing it in a way that gives people hope and optimism, and trying to say there is a constructive way we can view this, but it's, it's going to take discipline. It's going to take, having to maybe accept some people and their habits and their truths that maybe you disagree with. The more I think about it, it's really like, I guess when I was a little bit younger, I was more in a camp of, I guess, utopian thinking, of sort of thinking that we can get to this utopian sort of model. But the more you get older, you could still have an ideal or a utopian sort of resource-based economy or system to look towards, but it's unless there's some very drastic catalyst that's a super game changer, it's going to take a lot of just small victories, some larger than others, but just realizing, we've got to keep working towards something, but realizing this is going to take some work. This is really going to take some disagreeing. This is going to take some uncomfortability. And it's not going to be easy. I think that's a big part of it, is like, that's what we're going through right now, is like, it's like you want to lose weight or you want to work out or something that takes a lot of work. It's not going to be easy, but it makes it more rewarding and you appreciate it more when you get to the other side. But we're in the part right now where it's like, you're at the heaviest you've ever been and you're having to really lose that weight. And as a collective, we're just really like, this is a lot of fucking work. And a lot of people don't want to do the work, just like, I'll keep the analogy going with working out. Like, they'll quit and they won't keep working at it. Some people will try to do too much and then it burns them out. And for me, the key comes down to, and I still work on this, it's all about consistency. So just finding the amount that is going to be enough for you to do, and that will increase. But just for me, it was just doing a routine that I knew I would be enough to do consistently. Not one that I was going to be like, that fucking is going to crush me and I'm going to feel so sore, I'm going to like really hate it. But one that like, I feel it, but is going to be enough to be consistent. And I think that's kind of the key with the collective, is let's do enough to be consistent. Just keep putting in the work, to keep, putting in progress. And if we bite off too much, then that'll make certain people quit. If we do nothing, then you become nihilist and you become sort of apathetic and you say, well, fuck it, it's all fucked, and why even try? So it's a balance. It really is a fine, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah, I think the nuance that I really like that you pointed out there was going back to Charles, like when he was speaking to some of the deeper issues that we have on planet Earth, you can sense that he does have a grasp for the gravity of it. And it's not naive. It's not like, hey, humans are so incredible, we can conquer anything. But when you're detached from the actual, the real life details of what is happening, it does paint a different picture. And I think, the biggest thing that I noticed out of what you were saying with how to view what's happening in the world right now and not lose your mind or in a sense burn your nervous system out, is really understanding that there is a pace and you don't decide it. So that you have to keep listening for what the pace is. We want it to happen now. We're like, man, the solutions are this simple, and I do it every single day, and for some reason it's still not happening. And let's go back to the working out analogy. Is we simplify very complex things in our minds when we try to build a goal around it. That's a good thing, and that's also a very natural thing to do. It has its benefits. But with working out, a lot of the times we'll hear something like, a pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So you need to burn 3,500 calories to burn a pound of fat off of you. And we always imagine that pound of fat is going to come straight from the abs, right? So we're very optimistic, and there's this formula. And we have these ellipticals and stuff that tell us how many calories we're burning. And so we're going after these goals using that as a metric and having some kind of picture in our head of how it's going to turn out, when the body is so much more complex than that. And luckily, people aren't even talking about calories anymore. That's not the topic. It's either become a carnivore or stop eating meat altogether. That's usually now the conversation about weight. But I think the one thing that I really like is knowing that we don't decide the pace of the way it's going. So we need to toggle and modulate as well. And then on top of that, we don't know the destination. And the beauty of that is we have ideas of where we want to head in our life, but every single time somebody gets exactly the thing they want, it's a tried and true story that like it doesn't feel like the plateau, the utopian plateau I thought I was going to arrive at. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people want to lose weight, and then you dig beneath that, I want to look better. You dig beneath that and it's like, I want to look better for these people. You dig beneath that and it's like, I want to be validated by those people in this way. And you dig a little bit beneath that and it's like, I've never felt that from my family before. It's now become an obsession of mine. And you dig beneath that and you start digging into ancestral stuff. So we don't really know what we're after. We think we do, and that's good enough to get us moving in a direction, but we have to constantly come back to our intuition. Our intuition will tell us whether we are forcing our own pace upon something that already has its own frequency and rhythm, and if we're forcing our own destination on top of an ideal that's built by deeper soul-built cravings that want something different than what you have in your mind. So I think that's what the 2022 world could stand to understand is a little bit more like we do create our own reality, but we also co-create our own reality. And in that, a lot of life is not about forcing. A lot of it is about listening.
Yeah. I mean, two things that really stood out to me that to riff
and
off.
And do we want to, while we're rapping, do you want to shoot over to Curry Hobo?
Yeah. Let's see. It's updated. I think it's updated.
Can we hear him?
Yeah, and
say what's up, Curry. Oh, right on. Well, we
no
can
worries.
go back
riffing on.
Nice.
Can you see my Photoshop?
Gifting. Yeah,
we can see you now.
Yeah, I'm scribbling. I'm taking notes.
Sweet.
Very cool. I love this concept of integrating more. Oh, sorry, Ben. Let me get your Skype good again.
Art. More symbolic.
Well, the two things that stood out to me just now when we were riffing were the pace elements and the concept of also the characteristics of the destination versus a specific, like, I need to know. I'm very much somebody who's like, I need a specific blueprint or systemic design to work off kind of at times, and I need to be a little bit more free flowing, I guess you'd say, or organic or malleable. But basically, when you talk about pacing, and I'm multitasking here with the framing, when you talk about pacing, I immediately thought of, for instance, the concept of surfing, or any sport or anything anybody wants to use an example that you really are, I don't say dependent, but you're pretty much at the whim of the environment, right? So the conditions are always changing, and it's really up to you then, sticking with the analogy of a surfer, to be very good at adapting to the conditions of that day's swell. And so if it's big surf, or it's choppy, or if it's clean, or it's any characteristic, you adapt your hand-eye dexterity, your mentality, approach, all these kind of things to the conditions. And so you're really more about being very adaptable is the characteristic that's more, and certain surfers do better in certain conditions because they're more used to that. That's their home sort of turf or swell, so to speak. But the best surfers, like the Kelly Slaters, grew up on very tough conditions, and so they learned how to be good in any conditions. So pipeline was amazing to them compared to really rough Florida waves or something. So that's why it's kind of similar to analogy of certain people who can deal with tough conditions or grew up in traumatized or tough conditions usually can tend to deal with times like this a little bit better because they're like, this is nothing compared to like I grew up in war torn or extreme poverty or something like that. And I think we're really seeing that exposed right now more than ever because people who can't handle, it's kind of like people who can't handle pressure, you're seeing them pop. You're seeing the guy lose it on the battlefield and you got to slap him and say, get together, Kowalski, you know? And it's all love, it's all good, you know, we're in this, but it's exposing a lot of the underbelly of people's emotional intelligence and how adept they are at emotional intelligence. I've been talking about this, I forget where it was recently, I think it was a neighborhood friend, and was saying to the mother, like, they should teach emotional intelligence in all classes in all school. Like, it's a pretty secular thing you could approach, and it's so needed now more than ever. You could argue it's almost more needed than cognitive intelligence. Just how well can we deal with emotions? And what would be that curriculum? Would it be breathing? Would it be just learning how to just sit and understand our thoughts and just basic primitive mindfulness stuff? And certain more like progressive schools, whatever term you want to use, do that, like Montessori's and those types. But now more than ever, I mean, you could just see how much we could benefit if we had emotional intelligence training more as the norm in society. But that's room for opportunity. You know, go ahead if you want to speak to those.
Well,
two.
yeah, no, you're definitely right. I mean, there's that balance between, of course, we want to engage with reality and we want to we want to shape the world in our image and in like the highest potential we see for it. And we start with what's right around us, with what's most obvious that we can engage with. And then there's that fine balance that only our intuition can tune us into. That's, are we trying to change what is because we don't like the lesson? So we're hearing the teacher and we don't like it. So all of a sudden we're righteous, we're crusaders, and now we want to change this whole landscape because we, deep down inside, we haven't said yes to even admitting that there is some deeper emotional baggage, whatever, hang up, residue that we don't want to address. So we would prefer to crusade against something else. That's really kind of what I see is happening in the world. And I'd love to go through some of Derek Laudermilk's 2022 predictions because if like you can only go through predictions of people who have talked about or who are paying attention to what they find value in. And like we find value in things that it's not that we 100% choose what it is we find value in, especially when it comes to news or, you know, certain things that we research. It's we uncover what we find valuable and what we fear by the things we engage in and the kind of curtains that we place between us and certain aspects of ourselves. So like a lot of what I'm noticing about this coming world and what we're about to see here in this 1 minute 2022 recap of some of the biggest predictions out there, what we're going to see in 2022, which are quite interesting, is that this is the mindset. This is the zeitgeist. This is based upon the rear view mirrors, as Marshall McLuhan would say. We drive into the future using only our rear view mirrors. So predictions of the future are really only using our present and past circumstances. So keep that in mind as you hear what these predictors are saying, you know, what kind of things we may expect. And then we'll, you know, Gordo, you and I will just kind of hop on and share our thoughts.
Definitely. So I will play the video for us.
I watched more than 20 psychic predictions and astrology predictions for 2022. Here is the summary of the main themes that seem true across all the different predictions. In natural disasters, we have fires, floods, and asteroids being predicted, and we've already seen some fires. Community building is going to be a key theme for everyone. Community building and simplifying your life, getting rid of stuff, getting stuff off of your plate, making your life simple again. Hotspots for trouble, United States, France, and the Ukraine. There's a lot of predictions of the end of the British monarchy and also the end of Joe Biden's presidency. the rise of robots by the end of the year, and medical breakthroughs by the end of the year, and the continued collapse and volatility of the financial system. I watched more than 20 psychic predictions and astrology predictions.
There we go.
That's pretty interesting. So I wrote down floods, fires, asteroids, and if you saw Don't Look Up, that's basically about, planetary disaster. The need for community building, simplifying one's life, getting rid of clutter, hot spots for problems. It's not really specific, but US, Ukraine, and France. The rise of robots. So think Westworld. Actually, I wonder if I know I took some screen grabs of some of the new bots out there that with a face, real
it's going viral.
Intricate facial expressions. See if you could find that out.
Sophia's the one that talks, but there's one that has the face.
There's newer ones. Yeah, Sophia does talk and does have a face, but it's not sophisticated.
Here we go. And I watched a really great. It was either Cold Fusion or I think it was Cold Fusion. And they basically made the argument that I totally agree with that. Here's the face. Let's get it here. That if you combine basically the face of this robot with the brains of the Sophia robot with one other robot that's doing cutting edge stuff with basically sentience type things. Or the movement of Boston Dynamics robots. I think that was the other. Yeah. It's just you're starting to see the picture in the future. Combine all together. It's all right. This is
and it's gonna accelerate. To me, that's the main thing to understand is even if it doesn't accelerate, which I absolutely think it will, because the more people realize this is coming and this is the future, and this, you could say whatever you like about it, it's going to destroy the human race or save the human race or somewhere in between. The bottom line is more companies are going to flood more money into these once they see that they're performing like they want them to.
Yeah.
So the intelligence of them, you may see the first McDonald's and Burger King with a robot behind the counter.
They already had that. They have fast food places that are completely. Oh, that was crazy.
I did see that.
Yeah, completely
in
robotic.
China, I think.
I think there's some in the States now too. I'm pretty sure I saw. Right? Yeah, and it's I forget the name of it. We can Google that too. But it's basically there's still human workers who do some tasks, but the cooking and all that is done by the robots.
Interesting.
Robot fast food.
So the rise of robots and the financial collapse, I think, while you're looking that up, I'm just going to say something about financial collapse. I don't think it's collapsing. I think it is being siphoned into another bucket. And the game is just slightly changing a little bit. What I definitely want to talk about here in a little bit is Web3, the spatial web, NFTs, maybe Ready Player One, the Spielberg film, Metaverse, and what's called the Internet of Underwater Things. It's going to be next week or the week after. That's Waking Infinity News. That's all about the Internet of Underwater Things, which is just a whole new level of fuckery for the oceans. Hopefully not. Hopefully that it actually does start to get more sophisticated and my rear view mirrors are giving me false information about the near future, but we'll see. With that being said, the robots, this restaurant robot fries your food to perfection with no human help.
A robot named Flippy.
Years ago, a robot named Flippy. Oh, well, I'm glad they named it. I wonder if they gave it citizenship. Made its burger cooking debut at a fast food restaurant called Cali Burger. Is that Cali or Call Burger?
I think it's Cali, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably Cali.
The bot consisted of a cart on wheels with an extending arm complete with a pneumatic pump that let the machine swap between tools, tongs, scrapers, and spatulas. Flippy's main jobs were pulling raw patties from a stack and placing them on the grill, tracking each burger's cook time and temperature, and transferring cooked burgers to a plate. I won't go any further than that. Let's see, put Flippy on the market for $30,000 and the bot was no longer limited. That's going to be the only factor.
yeah.
It's not that we can't do that at scale. It's just the money needs to make sense beforehand, before the companies start actually doing the mass layoff. But this is definitely upon us. The thing we've been talking about for quite some time is definitely upon us. Whether that's good or a bad thing, I think it's inevitable when you talk about advancing technologies that there's a lot of people that don't want to do those jobs anymore. And that doesn't mean they know where they'll go next. But it's also like just company wide, it makes more sense economically to go in this direction.
I think that's the concern, is that for the and this is why there's such a rise of the populist movement on the left and the right, is that, and this is why Andrew Yang was so popular, is this idea of automation. And Lee Camp, somebody who could speak to a lot of the populist rise, and he's been a big part of that movement. But the bottom line is, corporate, if your main duty is to your shareholders, and this is going to continue to occur, and you have robots that can cook 365, they can't form unions, they can't ask for unemployment, they can't, all of the things that human beings need to do. They don't pay taxes. There's a lot of reasons why, to your shareholders and from a purely financial angle, they're going to want to automate everything. And this is the whole concept of why the smart city is also being so rolled out so easily, is because it's got such a huge financial interest. Take away the entire maybe control conspiratorial angle. It's just so lucrative to people whose whole industry is around automation, owning data, all that kind of stuff. So the key then is, and what people are concerned about is, okay, I don't want to learn how to code if I'm 45 and I spent my whole life as a truck driver, and now you're saying it's going to be automatically driven. How do we provide solutions, safety nets, whatever term we want to use, with this new transition? And as you said, I think a lot of people, these are kind of just crappy jobs that people could be doing something with a similar skill set, but something different that they find more fulfilling. And this is also part of this, is like, what are the new jobs going to be with this new era? But the current concern is there doesn't even seem to be any initiative like for this new shift. These solutions, as much as some people, like UBI was a big solution some people were into and some people were against because they felt it would make people not work as hard. But UBI, I support, but ultimately it's still, it's just a Band-Aid to a bigger gushing wound. Like, what is ultimately going to replace all of these jobs that are going to become obsolete? And the concern with the first industrial revolution, it was that the similar ideology occurred where, okay, we'll have these machines now that can do the work for us so we can have more time to spend with our family and do this. And ultimately that just led to more man hours, and it didn't lead to this sort of more idealistic thinking. So this is the weird crunch point we're at, where it's opening new opportunities for new systems, new jobs, new just whole technologies and fields. But the people in charge don't really seem to act like they care too much about like worrying about bringing along the little guy as this is occurring. That's sort of the concern. I think
I can kind of agree. I wasn't as you were speaking about this, like what is the plan for, if you look at it economically, like a CEO will cut one of their employees, like regardless of whether it hurts them or it doesn't, they'll cut them, right? And there's a cost to these things, and it's not up to the CEO, or it's not in the best interest of the CEO to worry about that. But when you're looking at macroeconomically, what do you do with massive resignation, massive layoff? And I'm talking not just nationally, but like internationally, globally, all because of the same thing.
We're seeing this great resignation too. This massive amount of people doing that now, which is creating this interesting situation now where there's more leverage for workers, but it's still this weird situation where they're asking for bare minimums. So but it's progress. But continue. Sorry.
Well, I mean, what I like about this conversation is it brings up the deeper necessity for there to be some game that we play collectively. Mm-hmm. It's economics is also a manner of communication between countries, and communication can mean the difference between being sideswiped and attacked by seemingly unprovoked, an unprovoked country like. Or a nation or agent or whatever it might be. like, I guess the real point is when taking a look at like the real, let me get back to the great layoff thing, that, you know, people changing what they do for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. We communicate within the nation economically, we communicate outside to the world economically. And with a shift like this, what's interesting about the conversation is like, UBI is not good, nor is it bad. It's a variable you can enter into a game that will definitely change people. And some of the smartest people can probably predict with a fair level of accuracy a lot of what will come of it, but nobody is able to predict everything that's to come of it. So the biggest thing that I'm looking at is like, economically, if you have to cut your employees, and let's say there's a lot of them, and you can't get wrapped up in the emotional drama of it, to me, can you see why at a large, like a macro epi level of humanity, why it's inevitable that there will be theories from people who are wide-eyed and, you know, and like, you know, chicken littles or not, that a depopulation scheme might be among us. And I'm not saying anything about what's going on now. I'm just like, to me, the main thing is, as we look at what could be happening in the world, it is a naturally emergent quality of a healthy, well-rounded consciousness to consider potential threats and potential dangers. Therefore, when talking about literature or topics of discussion, it is natural, and I would say absolutely necessary, not for everybody, but for at least some, to speak about things that would come across as pure conspiracy theory.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's a naturally emergent thing, because like in any system, whatever game we are playing, unless there is 100% transparency,
Exactly,
which I think maybe in the near future, not that we'll get to 100%, but like when it comes to blockchain and transparency in that regard, I kind of feel like, where does future government go? It's probably going to look a hell of a lot more gamified, and a lot of it is going to be very transparent. So anyone who has access to data, and there may be privileged, like if you buy into this area of the metaverse, you have access to the data, but if you don't, you can't look at that blockchain. I don't know. But
well,
I definitely, I see big things on the horizon is the main point.
Yeah, I mean, the system is, we're being forced to have great change or great sort of implosion, you know, as every great empire reaches this sort of threshold point. If they haven't designed a system in a way, like, it's continual iterations until you get to a systemic design that doesn't need to be iterated again, right? That's what you're saying. So it's like evolution collectively. And basically, I think a key part of the iteration that we didn't get right on this most recent go-round is the transparency side of it, especially with the creation of the deep state, so to speak, or the national security state, however you want, military industrial complex, these opaque parts of the government where this permanent bureaucracy was created, where we allowed this like infestation to occur. Some would argue just a straight up coup, essentially soft coup, and that was because of lack of transparency, all justified under the guise of national security, essentially. So this is why there's such a huge demand and urge and drawing towards transparent systems and solutions, blockchain, populist, direct democracy, you know, transparent voting, these kind of new systems. Like Estonia has an e-government. So the tricky part is, can we have a new iteration without having like mass violence and economic and poverty and great, you know, trauma? You know, like, can this be a peaceful transition? I think we all know there needs to be a transition. I mean, more and more.
It's the pace. I mean, because how quickly can you go from very little transparency and very cloudy transparency, meaning like misinformation and disinformation, one is intentional, one is not. We hear all this stuff all the time, but a lot of what that's doing, it's information in front of information. It's meant to obscure the information behind it. Mm-hmm. How quickly, civilization-wide, can you go from the amount of transparency and the quality of transparency that we have today to a healthy level? Can you just overnight switch? what would that transparency do? What would start coming out? Like, what new court cases would be all over social media if transparency changed overnight?
That's tricky.
These are big questions.
I mean, and if you are a benevolent person who's on the inside, who's, say you're a white hat, who's within the deep state, that's the challenge, is how to, and I guess they're kind of, what seems based on the actions in my research, I'm curious if you agree, is they kind of are taking an approach of dripping disclosure to a certain degree with certain things. But at the same time, you could argue, is that dripping, or is that just dripping to control the narrative? Like, how
is
much
it
of
cherry
this,
picked? Yeah.
And so, I mean, one moment I'm like, just rip the Band-Aid off the womb. We can handle it. We're big enough to handle it. You can't handle the truth. That whole argument, I think, is a false argument to stop us from handling the truth. But at the same time, I know some truth that I know about that I definitely feel strongly are probably true. Certain people would really psychologically, on a lot of levels, be very, like, it would heavily traumatize them.
Yeah, even if it's a small amount. And I mean, look,
we're seeing that kind of now with just
that's exactly what I was about to say. If you think about it, man, like, what are the numbers of people who are dying today of any reason that's changed dramatically? Because if you look at the overall death rates in the world for any reason whatsoever, it's almost streamlined across the board. It's not really changing that much. So, like, with that, I don't know, I'm saying when you take a look at that, what would happen if we were to, I mean, we know everything's being politically weaponized. If something were to be introduced where more transparency were to come out, any upset in the data will be weaponized. Oh, look, this great idea by blah, 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 whatever candidate, led to all of this. Now look at these people, they're out of a job, and all these people died. And, like, this is the quandary of power. It's the cost of power. Because if you look at those in power, it's not just mustache twirlers twiddling their thumbs like, Mr. Burns, and just deciding whatever they want to do, completely detached from the world. In many ways, what we would call the corporate elites are also at the mercy of what the people believe, how the people behave. And there's this X factor where you can highly predict what people in fear, in large numbers especially, might do in any given circumstance. You can run it through computer simulation models, and with a high degree of accuracy, you can predict the response of people. Like, we're going to release this film, we pretty much know what's going to happen from that. We pretty much can tell you all the kinds of comments that we're going to get from it. And then, so with that, there's this X factor, though. You can't completely predict it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the elite, or the 1%, as we would call it, is also at the whim of the 99%. And I spend a lot of my time not trying to find where the blame lies and how to divvy up the amount of blame, like 25% goes to the 1%, 75% goes to the 99%.
You get blame, and you get blame, and you get blame.
Right, yeah. It's just like, it's your fault, it's your fault.
Look under your chair, under your chair, you get blame.
Cool. Because the bottom line but I do spend a lot of time considering whose hands are actually on the wheel. I think there's like a ton of hands on the wheel. And that's one reason why, like, it's probably not driving straight, is because there are a bunch, as we, like, the old me thought that there was like one entity controlling all this. The new me realizes that there's only one real conspirator. And I've talked about that in the past. I won't rehash it now. But I think as far as who's driving the economic bus and who's slamming into entire populations, causing for a huge upset, it's not just Anthony Fauci. It's not just Bill Gates. Like, yes, they are huge players, but there is this epiphenomena of a bunch of different chemicals thrown together and reactions that we can scarcely wrap our heads around, let alone literature enough to try and say this is what we should do about it collectively.
I've heard you say that before, and I'm for myself, and I think it would help the audience too. Like when you say epiphenomena, what exactly do you mean by that? Go into that a little more.
Epi means above, transcendent
epidermis.
from, which, so like think of epigenetics. So epigenetics would be something that my genetics are given to me from my family line, and I have genes. Some will remain dormant, but they're still parts of my genetics, and they are turned on or off by environmental signaling. An epigenetic effect is something like the Holocaust happening, and there being people in the Netherlands that go without food. Their grandchildren, 2 generations removed, start to experience diabetes and obesity, and in a sense almost the opposite swing of the pendulum, which isn't something that was in genetics before that generation. So an epiphenomena is also how good Pink Floyd is, regardless of how much Roger Waters and David Gilmour didn't like one another. The epiphenomena was still whatever was going on with them personally. They made this music that no one of them could have made. It's this epiphenomena. It's transcendent of. So how did I even use the word epi before?
Well, just how what's occurring in society in a lot of ways an epiphenomenon of. And I wonder if that's if it's Matthias or no, that's a different Matthias.
Matthias de Stefano?
No, the person who originated the term collective psychosis, or the recent term used by Dr. Malone on Rogan, and this.
It wasn't Makula, was it?
No, it's I'm blanking. I can find it, but it's the big collective buzzword, collective psychosis.
Mass formation psychosis.
Mass formation psychosis. Yes, correct. Yeah, and
it's
I wonder
all
if
the memes now. Just check the interwebs.
Yeah, the internet's undefeated. I wonder if that's. I mean, would you say that's the same thing as what he's arguing? Like, do you think the conditions for this epiphenomenon are the same as his, or do you think what you're talking about is something? Do you view it something different?
Is what I'm saying the mass formations? It definitely bleeds into that territory for sure. Words are very interesting, like mass formation psychosis. Like, what is psychosis? We can scarcely define sanity. If you think about it, we don't even know how to answer the question, who am I? What am I doing here? Many of us can. I take that back. Many of us can. And whether that encapsulates the entire reason or not. Yes, mass formation psychosis. I also so back to that Charles Eisenstein film, and the music played the band. The main message in that was, I came into this world seeing nothing but wrongness and problems, and like, what is the wrongness that I sense in the world? Why am I so hesitant and reluctant to step into the gift of life? Because it's so beautiful. What's causing my hesitancy to really just step in and do my thing? And he goes on to say, like, I went thinking that everything was wrong in the world, everything from birth to death and everything in between. And then I came to realize that maybe it's not wrong, but it's ready to transition. Its absurdity has to come to fruition and mirror us in front of our face. It can't just be a conceptual mirroring. It has to actually come into our field in order for that environmental trigger to hit us and enliven certain solutions in us that are dormant otherwise. And in many ways, that's kind of what I think is happening now. Is we are in the midst of a story that is unfolding, and a lot of us are trying to grab the steering wheel of how that story is unfolding. And some of us also notice something that Charles Eisenstein also said in the documentary, that there is a matrix of causality that does not operate by force. And what that means is that if you try to force your reality to give you the gift of life, then you are going to be given the reality of force, the reality that is controlled by force. And if and whenever there is a bigger force, which there always is a bigger force on the playground, then in that case, you lose. So there's a different matrix of causality, meaning a world, a state of being that you can swim in, that causes for the same amount of influence and impact, if not more, in the world, but through a different mechanism. Like in the same way that you can take DMT or you can do Wim Hof breathing, and not everything, but some of the same phenomena will occur, two different triggers through two different pathways. So to me, what I feel is emerging right now is a need for an artistic revolution, a collective artistic revolution. And I think that's not just going to be people making music and sculptures and stuff like that. I think that old paradigm of what art is and the arts are must transcend itself to become something that we're almost being that collective organism. We're not taking commands from any person, but we're obeying the zeitgeist, and we're building harmony because that's what we know wants to be built. We know once we start building it, others are going to see it, and they're going to start perpetuating that. I think that's what's coming, and I definitely see this world of Web3, and I'll explain what that is for anyone who wants to know. Web3, NFTs, the metaverse. I see so much danger there. I really do. I see so much danger there. However, paradoxically, I also see a tremendous amount of potential energy that can be flipped back in the other direction. Not something that's robbing you of your attention, but something that's giving you back only feedback for how you're performing, how your nervous system is, how to modulate your breathing, how to mirror yourself back to yourself, to where you're not like, well, that person's an asshole. No, it's an algorithm. It's just mirroring you back to you based upon the parameters you set for it. So you can't argue with it. It's I think that's kind of the direction of collective art using technology that I do see, is us creating art to give an example of a higher humanity-wide potential that we just don't have examples for. Like a child being raised in a house that never sees human contact and hugs and stuff as a safe thing to do. Imagine what that child grows up to be. Now expand that out to the entire population. People who are dysfunctional due to intended things and unintended things. Like we sit all the time. We don't know how that screws up 5 generations from now. We don't have the science on it, but we're doing it like gangbusters, like it's going out of style. The average person, I think, they only spend 7% of their day outdoors, whether it's summer or winter. We're disconnecting from something incredible that was once our teacher, and now we've created a commercial, a never-ending commercial that distracts us from the teacher. I think probably one of the best things we can do with this is to turn the commercial into the teacher, if you will.
Let me play Steelman argument here a little bit, and for people, straw man argument is a lot of times a cheap way people try to use a false equivalent in an argument, but a Steelman argument is you try to hold up the best version, like a steel argument of. So I'll do kind of a Steelman argument for technology if we're just doing the abstract broader form. I agree with you on a lot of the sentiment, and so I guess what I'd say to Steelman for technology is, can technology be used to help us reconnect with nature, to help us reconnect with all these things that currently it's being used to escape from? I think, for instance, with augmented reality, I know it's very tantalizing, and for instance, the big Pokemon Go craze, that's still kind of big, but had a really big craze about a year or two ago, was kind of at its peak. And I was living in Santa Monica at the time, and I remember seeing whole groups of people, young kids, older kids, just walking along Venice Boardwalk and all around Santa Monica, going together to these different spots where like the gyms were, and trying to catch specific rare Pokemon. But they were walking a lot. They're going to all these different parks and cool areas. And I just thought about like they're obviously doing this because it's gamified for this game that's, has entertainment and value. And I was into it for a little bit. It was fun, but then I kind of got old. But I thought about I saw kind of similar to what you're saying is, how can this be used, augmented reality, to help us get more interested in the world around us? For instance, it may seem a little bit boring at first, but a game that maybe I was a kayak tour instructor one summer, and I would give tour guides to the Back Bay in Virginia Beach and talk about all the different wildlife and stuff around us. And I just kind of thought, like, it could have been cool at times if I had some sort of augmented reality or some way they could interface to see the stuff and be able to also recognize it or have it be described right quickly for them. You know, just trying to make your environment be it is already extremely immersive. And I guess I'm just trying to really, we have to steelman it in a way because it seems so inevitable. It's becoming more and more predominant. We have to Aikido it and use it in ways that's going to make us become better versions of humans, better versions of connecting with Gaia and Mother Earth, because I don't think it's just going to go away overnight. That's just unrealistic. So we've got to Aikido, and I think that's what I think the more ethical people like Lex Fridman and people in the AI and tech space are trying to do is say, how do we have ethics behind AI and new tech? How do we have social media that makes people communicate maybe better or teaches emotional intelligence or creates deeper bonds or, you know, really tries to, as we're saying, you know, and what's crazy is, I think Rogan was just talking about this, is China, however you feel about them, they're being very strict about social media and these things where there's a hard cutoff at 10 p.m. and kids are only allowed on their version of TikTok to see like people doing awesome stuff in sports, people who are really smart doing athletic or academic achievement. It's all just like, here's the best of China. But it's clearly like, well, that's probably a little stale and boring at times if you're only seeing, you know, so I think there is this dance and balance you can have with it, but we have to, in my mind, learn to integrate it in healthy ways and educate people and have companies that show kind of like the craze with food. I think would be kind of a good analogy where once you made it cool to care and once you made, you know, organic foods cool and also they taste good and you made really good meals and diets and you created companies that would, you know, make it more convenient, you know, to send it to your house. And just in the zeitgeist, you made it more about like, you know, it's important obviously to eat healthy for your body, but also it became trendy, you know, similar to yoga and mindfulness. Like, as much as people might find that kind of gross, like there is a certain level of you have to make it culturally trendy to have it impact the masses, you know?
Yeah. You know, there's a couple things that you mentioned there. I want to, anyone who hasn't seen The Sphere, go back and watch that film. Basically the whole plot is they find this sphere. It's kind of like a liquid, it almost looks like a mercury, liquid mercury sphere at the bottom of the ocean. It's huge. And they don't know what it is. They can't figure it out. But all this strange phenomena as they're at the bottom of the ocean with this submarine, all these strange things start happening. And some of their worst fears start coming to fruition. And by the end of it, spoiler alert, I mean, I'm not giving you like all the good stuff, but basically, you know, the very end of the film, they realize humanity is not ready for this because what it's doing is giving us our dreams and we're currently having a nightmare, you know, and those are my words put to that, you know, but they basically said humanity is not ready to be magicians. They are not ready to manifest the reality this quickly.
Right. Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is look at what the internet and where it's headed. So I wanted to talk about Web3 a little bit, and I won't go down a super rabbit hole, but just to express the virtual world of gaming is starting to loosen to meet the world of commerce, to meet the world of fashion, to meet the world of hangout space, to meet the world of travel, education. So the gaming get up, right? The goggles and all that stuff that most people think only people who are into video games would wear. This is the metaverses that are, or the one single metaverse, the virtual internet that you can go inside of and be inside of and hang out inside of, is this sphere. To me, it's this thing that is anything you want to create, you can. Now, it's not happening so ridiculously fast, but I'm making a metaphorical leap here to say that the internet is, you know, we're saying it's bad for us, but what if what's happening is like in an ayahuasca journey where we start noticing deeper aspects of who we are that we're not cool with, then the internet is showing us deeper aspects of what humanity is that we're not cool with. Arguments that we can't wrap our heads around, directions that people want to go that we can't even conceive of why that would look like a good thing. And so what you see are a lot of opinions flying around the internet, and I think it's not that that's going to change, but we are just in the beginning stages of really coming to understand what the internet and the evolution of it truly is, and what these technologies are all building towards.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's an internet of underwater things where there are a ton of companies that are going to be dumping sensors, nanotechnology, smart buoys, sensors at the bottom of the ocean, different levels of the ocean, all the way up to the surface. Ones up there that communicate with tetherless drones. A bunch of things that are there to just gather data from the ocean. Why not? Big data is so big. Why not gather as much data about anything that we can? How's it going to work? Well, it's not Wi-Fi. It can't send it through the ambient air, so it's sonically. And
wow.
frequency based. And Dr. Arthur Furstenberg, the guy who wrote The Invisible Rainbow, talking about the danger of pulsed harmonics, which are like your router and stuff like that. They're pulsed. And that pulse has an interesting effect on your physiology. The same thing's going to happen underwater. And I mean, I think maybe I still have it. I don't want to like go into too much detail, but this woman, Lindy Weilgart, did a 36-page ocean care report where she says noise impacts the development, including the body, and creates malformations in aquatic animals. Higher egg or immature mortality, developmental delays in metamorphosing and settling, and slower growth rates. Anatomical impacts from noise involve massive internal injuries, cellular damage to their neurons, causing disorientation, even death. And then just a sobering view. I won't get into it, but the details are super sobering, getting into here's how the oceans currently are. Here's how they're doing. Let me just give a few of these. Diatoms, a type of algae at the base of the ocean's food chain that also are a source of a third of the world's oxygen production, have been declining by 1% per year for the past 2 decades. Oxygen levels at the bottom of the ocean are so low now that it is destroying or it's killing many creatures that can only live down towards the bottom and forcing other ones that can live in shallower water up towards the shallow waters. And there was one last thing that was just disgusting. An Australian fish market found that their sardines contained 3 milligrams of plastic in every gram of their tissue.
Yeah.
So this is just the state of the ocean so far. So I mean, like, technology is not only hot on the trails of trying to save us, it's also the very thing that seems to be, and many different types of technology with different kinds of intent also seem to be the things that are destroying us at an accelerated rate. So to me, the only way that I can wrap my head around this particular thing is instead of being the crusader, like, I'm going to save the world, I'm going to change the world, because a lot of young people think they can change the world. And what's that quote? Older people or more wise people realize that all you can truly do is change yourself. And that's how you make your impact. What is the story that's unfolding here with technology? That's why I was about to do that film, Welcome to the Machine, with Tim Pool, and I still might do it. I still want to finish that film, is because I don't think most people have a grasp on what technology is and what it's showing us about ourselves. And ourself is also humanity. We are one. In one respect, we are one. And when we come face to face with the state of most people's emotional maturity, it can have deep emotional impact on us. It can lead to nihilism. I don't know how that's impacted you and how you've stayed the most optimistic conspiracy theorist, but like, how do you manage, Gordo?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, a lot of it is you have to be honest about when there is darkness, but it's A big part of it is, yeah, like you said, you only can control your own thoughts and actions, and always reminding yourself of that. But I mean, I think understanding the system in a lot of ways has helped me realize that what we see in the world is very much by design, in the sense that, especially mainstream media, legacy media, and all the tentacles of that it's intertwined with, are very much designed to give us a reality of the most fearful, scary one possible, essentially. And yeah, there's bad stuff happening in the world, but clearly it's overly hyped and overly sensationalized as part of their business model. And you could say, for whatever reason, money, control, more nefarious reasons, but that bottom line is very obvious now. So it's getting your perception of reality from the right places, from the people you interact with, from the news sources or the outlets you find to help get discernment and bigger pictures. But for a lot of people, unless they really approach it very disciplined, in the sense like really, really being mindful of where am I getting my information, and what is affecting me with the people I'm around, and just anything that affects your perception, and it's very subtle, you can slip back into it, So that's a big part of it, is just being aware of the turf you're walking, of the epigenetic environment, as you would say. And as you understand, okay, this is understanding how much environment affects you, because I definitely got into epigenetics and that blew my mind. And I'm kind of in the camp now where I honestly feel more like our environment affects us more than our genetics. It's I've seen it firsthand how much you could have the best genetics in the world, but if you're put in a bad environment, you can have the worst version of yourself come out, and vice versa. So
I think I wanna jump in there and say, Derek Loudermilk, he said community building this year would be an in vogue thing to do. I kind of want to maybe land there, and just maybe offer to everyone a little bit of an insight as to like what that means. By the way, I'm getting a lot of happy birthday wishes. My birthday is tomorrow. Thank you all. Phoenix Rising, Solid Spirit. Man, there's so many. This is a good chat. Thank you all. I've been loving reading through it, and I hope you guys don't mind, but I know you can probably tell I'm typing a little in the chat box, but I do that because I love the fact that you guys are so interactive. The community thing. This is a community, the comment or the chat room here. That's like one way of envisioning a community, and many of the people in this chat room come back quite often. And what I like about that is we're simply spending time with one another without immediately trying to commodify what it is. We're following an intuition that I want to be here. There's something here I like. And in the world mostly today, when you have no time, you leave no time for miracles. When you overly pack that's another thing Derek said, is learning how to simplify and organize and get your mind straight by also getting your environment straight and simplified. That there's something we are yearning for, and we have hard times putting it into words, even for ourselves. Even when we're struggling with something and somebody asks, what's the problem? It usually takes a while for us to get to what it really is. And then maybe afterwards we think about it more and we're like, you know what? I was dancing around it the entire time. It was actually this. This is what bothered me. And I think the whole thing with community is let me just not dance around it and get straight to the point. I think we as humanity are in for something big in the next decade. That doesn't mean I think it's going to be horrific. I don't want to put some kind of a tag to it saying like, I think it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, you better buckle up. I mean, maybe all those things, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. We're in for something big. So if it's coming, if you believe it, not because I'm saying it, but because you resonate that something is upon us, then simultaneously you must feel that it has dire consequence and massive potential for good. At the same time, it feels like a paradox. It has dire consequences, and there's so much room for it to get a lot darker from here. And a lot of us, we don't want to go there. We don't want to think about it. But what if you're not prepared and it does start getting a lot darker? It's going to be immeasurably darker than it would be if you were to have prepared for it when times weren't as difficult. So that's one thing. But with that, you also want to know, if you're about to go through it, if you're about to be put through the ringer, if you knew that you had 2 weeks and then you were about to start going through a process that you can't even conceptualize, but it's going to be really intense, what do? That's not enough information or data points to say, well, I just got to get me some Ethereum, right? Like we don't know exactly what to do to protect against what we sense is coming. So the only thing we know how to do is to develop our skills and really, really root ourselves in our relations, in our community. So my main point here is, no matter what's ahead on the horizon, no matter what we are in for as the human species, start looking for who you want to spend that time with. Who do you want to mirror you back to you? Who do you want to be in your midst, in your community, in, a 10-minute driving distance or a 5-minute bike ride distance, to be there to support you through something you can't even wrap your head around yet? That's kind of what I think is probably one of the better things we can engage in. I get a lot of people say, Ben, I love how upbeat and optimistic and solutions oriented you are on things, while still talking about deeper, darker realities that are out there. But how do you do it? How do you connect with all those solutions when all that shit is happening underneath? And the answer is it's a wave, and I deal with it by being a better father, being a better host, being a better friend, deeply looking at myself every single day and find, I can't go out and, not that I do vote for presidents, but I can't go out and vote for a president every single day. That only comes around once every 4 years. So what do I do with all that rest of my time? I have to show up to the best of my ability somehow. I have to let my body act out in this reality some kind of graceful solution, some kind of peace, some kind of solution. And the more I think we connect with listening to our inner barometer, our intuition, and saying yes to the breadcrumbs of whatever it's telling us. It's like that, in the Matrix, when someone's in Neo's ear saying, like, now turn left down the hall, now go like this. Like, he can say no, and in the very first one, he did, and he ended up getting arrested. But the bottom line is the intuition is always there guiding us, and I do think that we're focusing too much on how the outer world is going to look in 10 years and not what kind of inner development we can work on between now and then. We should be far more concerned in how much more we can show up to the mundane aspects of our life than, what's it going to look like when the most intense part of it arrives. So
yeah, no, and I tend to, that's very astute, because I tend to do that sometimes, is you get too focused on the result, focusing on what's the result versus just the process. And another key thing that kind of how the theme I took away from that was becoming very good at navigating uncertainty. So learning tools to deal, just like the original surfer metaphor, learn to deal with conditions that are constantly changing. What are habits that allow you to deal with constantly changing, environmental conditions? Learning how to adapt well. How do you become adaptable, with your mind, your body, and your spirit? But in very uncertain, volatile times, it makes sense that you'd want to become very good at navigating uncertainty. And I think a lot of people, we got very complacent during the 90s and early 2000s with this idea of certainty, and this is the way society is, and it's going to be this way forever. And then we had these bubbles burst, and things just started piling up where it got more and more uncertain and volatile. And the illusions of sort of the 90s and 2000s popped of just like, yeah, this superficial, like, weird dream we have of America and all this is not working, and we're seeing a lot of like you're telling us one thing here, but the results are very different, and people are going, you know, I'm not buying anymore, but I don't know exactly what the better solution is. You know, that was a good sell.
Who were the predictors there? What was the class of people that were the predictors of what to come in the 90s? Who do you think? A demographic. If it doesn't just come to you.
Wait, rephrase the question. Who is...
So, I mean, maybe it's too archaic, sorry. In the 90s, who were the ones that were saying, this is shit? What's happening is shit?
Oh, I mean, like, I think immediately of like Nirvana and grunge
Exactly.
music. You know,
exactly.
It's Kurt Cobain.
The artists.
I mean, yeah.
The artists were ahead of the curve because the 90s, man, music industry was booming. A lot of industries were booming. Nobody realized yet what the internet was really going to start doing. The world was our oyster. Everything was going great. Why was there Nirvana? Why was there Soundgarden? Why was there Alice in Chains, Nine Inch Nails, System of a Down, Marilyn Manson? All these groups that are talking about, like, a lot of them weren't talking even globally. They were talking internally, the darkness of the internal world. There's something predictive there that was like, yeah, you think it's all... you know, shiny and rainbows, and some would say it was a response from the 80s, the whole girls, the everything's great, chasing girls, you know, long hair. I mean, but it's not just a response of the 80s. It was also sensing, it was like the canary in the coal mine, sensing what's to come. You know, for the fourth turning, when it was still the third, when it was still the fall, the unraveling, then, you know, the artists were singing it, they were painting it, they were talking about it.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the most important roles for the artist in the classic sense of the artist. And I think that's the beauty of the human species, is the truth will always rise to the top. The uncomfortabilities will always rise to the top in the collective zeitgeist. You know, the undealt with anxiety and trauma and lies and illusions of assumptions about society and how we should act towards each other and certain social contracts, they will break down if they're not designed correctly. You know, certain things have withstood the test of time, you know, and those are, you know, few and far between. You know, I'm trying to think the best examples, and I know they exist, but like, this is how it works ultimately in my mind as a primitive species. You continue more and more iterations until you get to a point where, like, okay, like, I think we've got our shit together enough to where we can go interplanetary and we can handle being a good, you know, diplomat to more primitive species. But it makes sense. Like, you wouldn't want some super unenlightened jackass running around other planets and be like, what's up, guys? You know, we're here to just show you how to rock and roll and love. Like, I think it's part of, there has to be, I don't know if there has to be, but it would make sense. There's got to be a humbling. There's got to be a certain matching of the emotional intelligence with the actual technology. And until those line up more, I'm in the camp of, I definitely think we're being visited directly and indirectly by more benevolent species, but that's a big part of why it's not so direct, is that it's like, get it together, match the responsibility of this type of power that this tech and this understanding has, and then we'll fill you more into the sort of wisdom school of the cosmos. But right now, we're still at that phase of like New Kids in the Block, just learning to play with these big weapons and concepts and understand. It's just like a little kid learning about like touching his body and understanding like, oh, this is how I work. Like, we're still at that phase. But as you pointed out, like, we're very arrogant about it. Like, oh, no, I got this. I know how to use this vehicle. Like, this baby's got a Hemi. Like, no worries. Like,
yeah. Well, we have high expectations, and a lot of this, I mean, I know I point out a lot of things that could look like the problem, but really just framed differently, we have the aspect of consciousness to view the end result of potentially our present actions instantaneously. So quick it happens. And along the way, if we're feeling good, right? If we're like, if everything else is going on in our life, and then we start pondering like, what if I what if I just dump all my money into this one stock or something like that? You know what I mean? Because we're feeling good and we can see how it would lead into the right direction. Or let's say it's a lot smarter than that. It's much more sophisticated than that. There's this process, right? There's a reason why we don't just think something and then reality changes. There's this process of it must percolate and ripple through the densities of reality. And that takes, according to us, this thing called time, and also a long space as well. So, I mean, it's just, I guess what I'm driving at here is like, we are at a beginner stage, but I think what it is right now is we're also, I had a lot of people say this when they saw Kymatica. They were like, it was above my head, but it didn't feel like it was intending to be. And it made me want to strive to understand what you were talking about.
It's like a good coach.
Exactly. And that's what flow state is. The flow state is most accurately arrived at, not 250% above comfort level, 4% above comfort level. 4%. And that's a very specific window, meaning there are best practices, and it's not as difficult as you might think. And a lot of people think it's ramping up. It can only get worse. And yes, it can get worse, but also what the flip side of that is we're learning how much resilience we actually have. We also learn how complacent and compliant we are to things that we thought, I would never deal with that. Yeah, over my dead body. And then, you know, a lot of people who've said over my dead body didn't die. They did the thing they said they would never do, because when the circumstance was actually upon them, they weren't just thinking 5 years back when no problem was actually facing them. This is how I'd act if some, you know, government agent came to my house and asked for my guns. And then the moment actually arrived and you realize, you see your kids standing there and you realize, like, you know what? I could either end it now, be a crusader and a hero, or I could see what tomorrow brings and I can make some compromises. And I know, you know, that was that one point in the movie Braveheart when Robert the Bruce was like, I believe in him, I love him. And his father, the leper, was like, of course you do. He's uncompromising. He doesn't make compromises. They're the easiest people to get behind, and they will die young. That's the interesting thing about it, is that's the idea of being like a rebel without a clue. Being a rebel is one thing, but being a sophisticated rebel comes across more like a diplomat. It comes across more like an artist. So there's something in that. And I think that because of the internet and technology and the fact that we're, whether we like it or not, we're just using it more. Even people who hate it are still scrolling all day long. So I think what it's doing is it's showing us who we actually are. We have who we think we are, but it's showing us who we actually are. And it's causing us to realize, like, ooh, I thought I was gassed. I thought I didn't have any breath left. But now that I realize I see where my potential could go and I want to go there, then I realized that there was this reserve, this dormant reserve of energy inside me that was always there, but it wasn't going to come out through the matrix of causality of control. It had to come out through a different mechanism, a more relaxed, more parasympathetic, more, let's say, artistic flow state of being, which is also a surrendering to the environment. And because even Michael Jordan, when he was making amazing, slam dunks from the free throw line, he was saying it felt effortless. It felt like I just became the game. Right. I became the air. I became the ball. I just merged with the task at hand and the environment around me. That happens when you're in love and time disappears. That happens when you are doing something that you absolutely freaking love and time disappears. There's something in that I think we can experience collectively, and it will have a bigger impact than a huge overthrow of the systems that be. Yeah, that's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Interesting name, but the triggers for flow are
exactly what you're hitting on here.
Actual triggers, yeah.
Yeah, and this is obviously Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel's work, but I was always, when I first came across their research with Flow Genome Project, I was immediately hooked and thought it was so interesting how they combine neuroscience with these specific sort of environmental and all the social triggers. But a big one you hit on just now was the skill to challenge ratio was one. Where's that? The challenge to skill ratio. Basically, if something is, and this depends on the individual, but if something's too hard, then it creates anxiety. If something's too easy for you, then it creates boredom. So that's going to be different. That ratio is going to be different depending on the person. You know, a beginner at tennis versus a pro at tennis. Playing another pro is going to be a good, area versus a beginner playing a pro is going to give you anxiety because they're just crushing you. So all these little triggers, your environment, and I'd love to talk to them at some point, but yeah, I mean, and so there's real science to back up these things that have been talked about in the past, like being in the pocket when you're a jazz musician, or being in the flow or the zone as a quarterback, and just the world, as you said, or Michael Jordan,
the
great athletes.
Box
Yeah, they can. Yeah,
long stroke for
every
artist,
artists, gamers, athletes, everything. People who just do knitting, you can get into flow states in pretty much almost anything if you care about it enough. And as you described, the feeling of what it's like to be in a flow state, the sense of timelessness, effortlessness, information rich, and the sense of self disappears. STIR is sort of the acronym. Yeah. It's a real powerful place to be in, and arguably the most optimal form of consciousness to be. And being in that as much as possible is kind of, I think, their theory behind the Flow Genome Project, is to create gyms and things to help teach people how to reproduce it more often, essentially. And they had some really cool machines they use. I don't know if you saw the stuff they were doing with the machines that would act like it was snowboarding, or all these cool.
Yeah, and I love all that stuff, and I think that's where technology could go.
Right.
Because so there's also this thing where most people, they see the current predominance of technology, and they see that if technology becomes more prominent, it means that it will be in our face more, and it'll be bombarding us more. And that's only according to the current paradigm. I think if we were smarter about it, we would realize that, remember when we were saying that 4% above your comfort level is where flow is triggered? Right. I think it's probably the same for technology. I'm not going to say, without any looking into it, that 4% technology to 96% biology is the sweet spot. I don't know. But what I do know is technology can do what anything else does. It sends you feedback. It helps answer in real time in many different languages, through the body, through gravity, through electromagnetics, through light and photons. It answers the question, who am I right now? Not all the time, not 10 years ago. Who am I right now? How is my body doing? How does it orient to nature around me? Technology, if crafted correctly, can send us very valuable feedback in ways that tells us, like, okay, I know you think you're doing a good job, but you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and you're gassing yourself too quick. And you think that you're slaying it against this opponent, but the opponent is letting you tire yourself out. The right amount of technology doesn't have to be some quantum, supercomputer sending you information. It could be a very simple mechanism sending you feedback. Hey, your breathing is off. Hey, your nervous system is getting peaked. You might want to chill a little bit. So, like, that's one aspect. The last thing that I wanted to mention about that is, if you go to anyone who's in the deeper dives at benjosephstewart.com, if you sign up for the deeper dives, the very last one, I showed roughly 10 minutes of natural movement training with Rafe Kelly and Ben Metter, and making a case for why to take your movement practice into nature. It will blow your mind, and I haven't even scratched the surface. That 10 minutes is just like the tip of the iceberg, because nature also feeds back very rich information that we haven't come to quantify and put into peer-reviewed journals yet, but it's there. It's there. And we do know that forest bathing has real effects on your mood, on your hormonal state, we do know that even having plastic or artificial natural landscapes in hospitals lowers anxiety and lowers cortisol. We know that being in nature allows for deeper hearing between relational partners, friends, not so much of friends. Being in nature, it modulates relationships. So there's something about that we need more of. And this is why in my Wix group, I have this little group called the Mysterium. I haven't done much with them yet, but go and stand on the ground barefoot every single morning, no matter how cold it is, no matter if you just do it for 15 seconds. Go stand on the ground for a little bit every single day, and it will change your life over time. It won't be this thing that like, oh my God, yesterday I was grounding and now I think I've achieved Buddhahood, right?
Nice.
It's not going to go that fast. Get over the ego of it turning you into a better version of yourself. You already are a better version of yourself. Enjoy the process. It takes time for your physiology to start glowing from the inner work that you've done, but you need to root it back in nature. And I don't think that technology is anti-nature. I think its current iteration is not doing any favors for nature, and it may be our undoing. I'm just going to say that. I mean, like, technology may actually be our undoing. It's like, we can't deny that it is causing great problems. And I'm not just talking about like self-esteem issues through social media. I mean, the production of plastic that is in just about everything we eat, the impact of industry and telecommunications. This is unreal what's happening. However, I do believe in miracles. I really, really do. And in a sense, I could find a more scientific word for miracles.
Even
but
just
I choose not to. It has to be something that lies beyond our current conception, because we're saying this is impossible. This is impossible circumstance. And the only thing that can do the impossible is a miracle. And I do believe that we are due for one. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't think it's going to look Hollywood. I think it's going to be so understandable that it's like, fuck, I didn't realize that if everyone, or if half the population just chose to start singing, just singing together all at once around the world, that would have more of an impact than any Hollywood film about an asteroid or the dangers of social media or anything like that. It's beyond rationale. Some of the solutions are. And I think we do need to go there. So there's a case for doing the irrational. And I say, take your movement practice to nature. You may not think that this is going to make you a more virtuous person, but go watch our podcast with Rafe Kelly, or look at what Rafe Kelly is doing. He's just putting people through parkour courses in nature, and people are having full-blown trauma releases, these incredible community moments, healing past PTSD, going through almost ayahuasca-like transformations, doing parkour in nature. Who'd have thought? But with the right support, something inside you knows, ooh, I can go to that depth because I'll be held by people who understand, not by people who don't understand and they'll call me crazy, Yeah, so I think solutions are upon us. Solutions
it's a little bit
really
different than, say, like CrossFit, where it's more about achievements and competition. It's got a more social community element to the, physical element, and that's a critical ingredient, because there's plenty of gyms and stuff out there, but what makes Rafe unique is a lot of things you're hitting on. And human ingenuity is one thing, and I'm a strong believer in just human ingenuity, and you can argue certain times human ingenuity has done miraculous things. But just for instance, sticking with just the microplastics in the ocean example, human ingenuity for somebody like Boron Slot, I think it's how you pronounce, obviously it's not perfect having somebody having to invent something to collect all the plastic with these massive new machines that he's invented, the ocean sweepers.
Yep.
Things like that pop up. But also, I just read an article, and I had to, fact check on this, but like, I think it was pretty sure it was saying new bacteria is forming in the oceans that's learning how to eat plastic. It's like, oh, geez, well, it's working, but we forced Mother Earth to learn how to eat plastic to deal with it. And that just shows you how badass and adaptable she is. But, at the end of the day, Mother Earth's gonna be fine. Humans will get exterminated or get very endangered. She'll continue thriving, whatever happens. So it's always been more about, can humanity make this experiment work with this many of us now pretty much all completely taking over, living wherever there's land pretty much. And that's the experiment. Mother Earth's going to continue on until a sun or whatever big freeze takes her out. But we've got a challenge in front of us, but it's an opportunity as well. I wanted to give a little shout out. Curry had to run, Kurt, but he did finish a bunch of the cool drawings. I love the idea of having sort of the resident artist joining us. We'll have him back again. He had to pick up his daughter, but he did a bunch of cool ones about what we were talking about. Let me see if I can get it to match best with the frame here. And I think it started at the beginning here at the top. So we get
that's
into
cool.
open
I'd love to make that
source.
available for everyone.
Yeah, we have it as a file and a video, so I can probably share it to the socials. Talking about Don't Quit.
Number 33 with Zyrtis. That was last week. That was good.
About the pod, NFTs.
I met them in the same day. I met Zyrtis and Curtis in the same day.
Okay, there you go. Very, very synchronistic. Charlie E.
Music played the band.
Doing his thing, talking about that gravity. That's cool little.
Yeah.
Code creation. We don't like the lessons.
Sometimes we don't.
We'll set you free. First, it'll piss you off.
Yeah.
Let's see. Food fires, asteroids, financial rebuckling, robot. That's a cool little robot he did. I like that.
Yeah.
He must be doing this with like a pad and a little freehand.
I forget what the pad is called. It's a Wacom tablet.
Oh yeah, those are cool. That's a cool little robot blockchain. That's cool. The Depop.
It's a cool reminder of what we've talked about.
Yeah, I love it. It's a little fun TLDR to wrap things. This is Quandary of Power. Looks like it's a leaf, and it's cool.
Oh, that's that's the pine cone from Awake in the Darkness.
Okay, nice. And then it looks like almost like a wormhole, a black
hole. Yeah.
A ton of hands
Mass
on the wheel.
Formation Psychosis.
Right? Epiphenomenon. Yep. Matrix
of reality.
Artistic revolution. That's really cool.
You see all those mushrooms growing out of it and the mycelium. That's cool.
What's that say? Get up versus Gaia versus tech. Not like with the yin and yang.
Yep.
Very creative. Higher human potential.
Oh yeah. So he's saying like the balance between Gaia and tech for higher human potential.
It's almost better. It's like art, like an art class where we're like, what do you think the artist is trying to say here without him here?
Yeah. Let's try and break down
I think he's
meaning.
Expressing my trauma.
He wants to do mushrooms.
The Sphere 1.30. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Gaming, crypto art. Oh, I like that little black and white effect there. Nanotech, travel, data, fashion, crypto.
The body.
And gaming is in this sort of, it's all kind of connected to it. And that's the end. Nicely done.
Cool. So very nicely done. Thank you, Curry Hobo.
I'll put his info in the description.
Yeah, in the chat, somebody, Josh Crane said, what's the name of the guest he was just talking about? I want to look up the podcast he referenced. I don't know what number it is, but it was Rafe Kelly, evolvemoveplay.com. He's doing incredible stuff. Yeah, man. I think that's a good place to wrap it. Maybe the 2022 forecast is kind of cool. I think my favorite part of that is simplifying and community. Simplifying the mind, simplifying our tasks, if you had to remove 80% of the busyness that you engage in day to day, what would be the 20% you would keep? And then how would having 80% more time enhance the time and attention you would give to that 20%? So simplifying your life and simplifying your mind. If you think about it, I know I talk about magic, and oftentimes I don't really deeply explain, especially not the experience I have with working with magic. It is a science. It's just a practice. You allow your body to be the bridge between the abstract and the physical and the 3D world. And when it comes to magic, simplifying, organizing, and integrating your mind into activities, even writing or sitting inside of a salt pentagram with a grimoire and, you know, in a certain robe with incense, things that hit all of your senses, a fully immersive experience, not virtual, you know, a fully immersive experience. And then you orient your mind and your emotion fully on an outcome. And it doesn't just pop into existence, but it moves, it like resonates in a new way. You begin to resonate in a new way. And I think that when we simplify our lives and our minds, that's the first part of magic, to be able to really focus your mind. Because most people, they just settle for the outcomes of the immature magic they create in their life, and they call it circumstance. They just say, oh, well, I guess this is the way life is. Most people don't realize they have so much more agency. And so simplifying your mind is one, and community building. Find the people who will be your checks and balances. When you're going too deep down a rabbit hole, or when you're not even touching your potential, or whatever it might be that you're not living into your potential, your community will be a mirror. If you choose them correctly, they won't be an echo chamber allowing you to destroy yourself with addictions and behavior patterns and, you know, whatever it might be. They will call you to a higher version of yourself. So community and simplification of your goals, I think that's a good way to say that's pretty much what I'm bringing to 2022. And hopefully I can bring it to the content that I continually make for everyone. Gordo, 2022 for you, what's it going to look like? And then we'll wrap.
Hot seat. I think it'll look, there's going to be some change, with where I'm living, with kind of just a new chapter is going to be unfolding with how I'm trying to just approach my own sort of journey with my mind, body, and spirit, but also just with the next chapter with what I want to do in collaborating with you as well. I mean, I'm really just trying to be in a place where it was like this whole idea of navigating uncertainty, continuing to foster those sharpening. I think I've got them pretty sharp, but they're still like, you've got to continue to keep them sharp, and they can definitely be sharper. So just continuing to try to work on just my emotional intelligence as we deal with more volatility, trying to stay disciplined with, you know, things that just require discipline, with working out, diet, with career, and then just always just trying to remind myself to just be not so self-critical, be more, you know, loving without conditions placed on it, for myself and others. And yeah, I mean, I'll keep it at that, you know, because that's big enough as is. But I think it's gonna be. I think it will be. It might not be fully out of the hole, but I think we're gonna see more of like the more signs of the light, right? The light at the end of the tunnel. We're gonna see more of the glimpses this year, because 2021 and 20 were really a lot of just like necessary volatility to shake things up for the new systems to be implemented. But now is really where the fun work can begin. You know, I think we're coming out of the puking and purging phase, but we're definitely still not out of the still experiencing the ayahuasca collectively. And then the next stage is obviously once you leave the retreat, so to speak, metaphorically, then you have to continue to try to live day in and day out. Remembering that, but just like not falling back into the subtleties of the BS and old conditioning and the environment. So I'm optimistic eternally. And, you know, at the end of the day, if it is nihilist and this world's going to shit, man, it is what it is. It was fun. But I'm not in the camp where like I want to live through it and just be living in like post-apocalyptic Mad Max. I'd rather be like, all right, I'm going to try out a new gig. But
I'm not wearing that shit.
Yeah. So
I feel you.
Yeah, I'm really just like we either make or break it, and so I'm all in on making it. But I'm not naive that whatever, things could happen.
Yeah. Well, let's see. 2022. It's upon us. Let's see the way it goes. I'm excited about this coming year. I hope all the listeners are really excited as well. Man, who is it next week, Gordon?
I think it's William Henry.
Next week, William Henry. That's going to be a really good one. And then we'll have Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats the week after that. And hopefully in the not too distant future, Lee Camp.
Awesome lineup.
Send some anyone who has like suggestions of people. I just found this guy Jonathan Pajot, who's just on the Michaela Peterson podcast. He's really cool. But send some suggestions. I just have to say, thank you to everybody. There's just, I mean, Destiny rocks. He just said, thank you, Ben and Gordo, and everyone in this chat. Until next time, live well. Yes, go to the deeper dives. Really good chat group. Honestly, thank you all. It's always like really interesting conversations going on in there. I love how it takes on a life of its own. But that being said, next week, William Henry, that's going to be super interesting. He put out a book called The Skingularity is Near. Not the singularity, but the skingularity. It's very interesting he knows about the Internet of Bodies, and he knows where tech is headed, and he's got a very, very interesting take on it. So I'm excited about that one. I love you all. Keep coming back. I have a really cool Waking Infinity news for you on Monday. I have no freaking clue what I'm going to do for Friday Night Acoustic Night tomorrow, but we will see. With that being said, love you all, and I'll catch y'all next time on the Ben Stewart.